Hey, seventh graders. I'm so sad to not be with you online today. However, I recorded this video so you can still continue learning about cell division. Um, this little meme on the side, why is it called cell division when the numbers multiply? So remember, this is the only time when you will probably have division going on and you'll be ending up with more than you started with. Kind of a strange concept. If you think back to the notes that we took last week, we started with kind of general overview of what is cell division, why do our cells divide, why is it different with body cells versus sex cells. Then the last time that we were together online, we talked specifically about mitosis. And now we're going to go and talk a little bit more about just the cell cycle and get into some specifics of the entire thing, not just that mitosis piece. As you're watching the notes, feel free to rewind the video, pause the video, whatever you need, but be sure you're getting these written down on your in your version so that you can submit them for some points. Okay, so how long does it take for a cell to divide? This is a question that I've had from a lot of people as we were talking so far, so here is finally your answer. Cell division rates depend on the need for that type of cell. So again, you should be writing down the highlighted parts on your page just so that you can get points. But here is kind of a table that shows you the cell type and the approximate lifespan, so how long it would take for that type of cell to divide. So you can notice that a skin cell only takes about 2 weeks, which is why if you get a cut on your finger or knee or something like that, it takes about 2 weeks for it to be completely healed. And then the longest lifespan is your intestine and muscles and other tissues. These ones take up to 16 years, which is why it's important to try really hard not to damage this type of cell. On the side over here, it says the cell cycle of a fly embryo cell takes just 8 minutes, while a human liver cell can last longer than a year. And then this last paragraph says the cell division rate in nerve cells is permanently at 0. You are born with the amount of neurons your body needs for life. This is why if you have damage to your spinal cord or your brain, a lot of those injuries are permanent. That's why when somebody has an injury that causes them to be paralyzed, that's oftentimes irreversible because these nerve cells don't actually do cell division. And if they do, it's really, really, really slow. So it's not fast enough probably for you to get better within a life period. All right, so here is the cell cycle. We've seen this before when we were watching the Amoeba Sisters video, but here it is so that you can refer back to it as you study for things in the future. So the biggest phase, so this entire purple part of the cell cycle is actually interphase. So this, remember, is the time when your cells are growing, they're duplicating their DNA, they're getting more cytoplasm, more lysosomes, more organelles so that they can eventually divide. This green part here is mitosis. So this is the division of the nucleus, which is what we talked about last class period. And within mitosis, we have a couple of stages that we'll see on the next slide. And then lastly, this tiny little blip in the cell cycle is cytokinesis, which is when you actually have the cytoplasm split and you end up with two individual cells. Okay, so here's the phases of the cell cycle. Again, we talked about these four pretty in-depth last class period, but this is, again, the entire cell cycle here. So we start with interphase, prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase are all a part of mitosis. And then cytokinesis is just that split second at the end. This part here is what you should write on your notes. Mitosis is the division of the nucleus. So we have these four unique phases of the cell cycle within mitosis because dividing the nucleus, that's where all of the DNA is housed. That's a pretty complex process. So here, we're not actually going to go through this because we talked in depth about this last class period, but I just put it in this set of notes as well, just for another place that you can reference if you need to later on. But it just kind of goes through what happens at each phase. Okay, so on this slide, the goal is to be able to identify the steps of the cell cycle in order. And a lot of times, in order to remember this, people come up with mnemonic devices. So I came up with two here. And if you notice, we have the first letter of each phase down the side. So interphase, prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase, and cytokinesis. So we have I play music at the club, and I'm pretty magical and totally cool. So on this slide, I'd like you to make your own mnemonic device, and you can actually write it right here. So how will you remember the phases of the cell cycle? All right, and here is our last slide. We are coming back to this idea of plant cells versus animal cells. And when you look at that very last phase of the cell cycle that we call cytokinesis, this is the division of the cytoplasm, and this actually is different in plant cells versus animal cells. In animal cells, the cell membrane just kind of pinches together, and those two edges kind of move closer until eventually it pinches off, and you have two completely different cells. With a plant cell, remember, they have this really rigid cell wall, and so they can't actually bend their cell wall very easily like the animal cell can. So what they have to actually do is create this cell plate, and this actually you should write on your notes as well. But they basically build a wall in the middle of the two nuclei that just formed, and that can then form that kind of fourth wall of the plant cell. So the plant cells, when they're doing cytokinesis, they have to build this cell plate. The animal cell, they just kind of pinch together until you end up with two different ones. And that's because this one is so much more rigid than the animal cell. All right, guys, if you have any questions, feel free to send me a Schoology message. However, I hope that you enjoyed these notes and learned something new. Please submit them so you can get your credit and go on to do the cell division gizmo. Thanks so much, guys.